So, welcome back to another video. And last weekend we got the calling Montreal in the books, and the calling was eventually taken down by Conor Bryant on Dash.io. A big congratulations to him. But no offense to Conor, but it's actually not the deck that I'm most interested in. So I actually reached out to Jacob Gladman. Do I pronounce that correctly, Jacob?
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah. And you posted in Discord channel your deck list after day one, finishing day one at 6-1, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I think.
And I was really intrigued about the way you went about Arachne Marionette, because you're using a more stealth heavy build than we are used to seeing these days. But at first, would you like to introduce yourself to the viewers? Who is Jacob?
Yeah, so my name is Jacob. I'm from Toronto, Canada, so pretty local for this calling. I've been playing Flesh and Blood for almost 2 years now. I think I started with the heavy hitters like KO Armory deck the day that released. And then I've been pretty much one-tricking Arachne Marionette since Hunted came out. They've been my favorite hero. I've been playing them a lot, bringing them to a bunch of different events. I've had some tier 2. I want to peak you with it, qualified for Nats with it. This has been my go-to deck for a while now, so glad I had a good showing at the calling with it too.
Yeah, it's a really fun hero.
Oh yeah.
I enjoy it a lot as well.
Mm-hmm. I think Arachne has been my favorite trading card game deck of all time. I played a bunch of trading card games throughout my life, and I don't know, there's just something about the deck that's just so fun to play.
Oh, well, that's great to hear. What else have you been into?
In terms of heroes or in terms of other card games?
Other card games to begin with.
Yeah, I think Flesh and Blood's the game I played the most seriously, but I've dabbled with Pokemon. I played a bunch of Magic in high school. Played a little bit of Hearthstone, a little bit of Legends of Runeterra, but Flesh and Blood's been the first one that I've kind of really dove into in a competitive sense.
Oh, that is awesome. It's a really good game, I must admit.
I agree.
Yeah. But I'm gonna switch over to the other window here, and I said in the beginning that there is a when Marionette came out with the release of the Hunted, I am pretty sure to begin with, a lot of people didn't have them figure out really what they're supposed to do, how many stealth you're supposed to run. And many of us, me included, had a hard time giving up on the usual power cards, like Surgical Extraction, for example, was a big one. And I was baffled about that when we finally came to the conclusion that Surgical might not be the right card for this kind of deck. Because there's such a big difference having a stealth card with non-hit that you can buff with any other card in the deck. And then there was this instant synergy with Bonds of Agony, of course, like a real powerhouse card, alongside Take Up the Mantle, which made the deck really bonkers, not as bonkers as Slippy, which has had a free go again. But as far as I remember, back then there pretty much were mostly, not only, but mostly stealth builds. Then Bonds was banned, and the Dagger builds became this standard go-to for Arachne. And I'd say it has been Dagger builds most of the time since then. I haven't seen a deck like yours in quite a while. Or rather, I've seen them, but I haven't seen them being very successful. And you ended up on 9-3 in a high-level event, and just you bubbled out of top 8. You were in contention. So it's a really great showing.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'm very impressed. But would you please walk us through your process of how did you end up with a more stealth-heavy build?
Yeah. So like you said, back in the early days, everyone was on these stealth builds, and then the deck kind of shifted more towards a dagger-centric build over time. And I think I started playing these stealth builds about 2 seasons ago. It was during a PQ season, and I was kind of noticing that with the stealth builds, or with the dagger builds, I was playing a mostly dagger-centric build. And basically what I noticed was that I wasn't really loving how many blues they're running. Like, so since then, like the standard amount of blues has been continuing to drop. But I was finding that especially after the Orb Weaver Spinneret ban, I wasn't loving how centric I was on Graphene Chelicera.
Yeah.
So I found myself using my Mask of Deceit pretty much to turn into Orb Weaver, like in
Yeah.
probably 80% of games. And then people started like teching towards the Dagger build. So they were playing like Ripple Aways. Everyone knows what Daggers are kind of trying to do. And it just kind of became pretty hostile to play it. And I just didn't really love how I was very, very dependent on using this Graphene Chelicera. So I wanted to kind of come up with a way that I can kind of deviate from that. And in my local metas as well. So like I think the baseline deck for Daggers, most people will agree, is like probably Kashi's deck. Like that's kind of the go-to starting point. If you go on Discord and start lurking around these assassin discords and asking about Marionette decks, you will find that deck. And basically what I found with his deck is that he had a lot of cards that I didn't really need for my specific meta. So for example, he's like running Poppers. There's not really many local Prisms. He was running Amulet of Echoes. Wasn't really any local Asilios at the time. And basically, I was able to take these cards out, and I kind of noticed that I had room to put it in a Dagger package. And then as I started taking out the Dagger reacts, I was finding lots of success as well. And my meta had a lot of like local aggro players, so I found that like the very first version of like this kind of hybrid style that I was playing, I basically had no Dagger reactions. I was only playing the Dagger pumps, and then I was playing 9 Mark of the Black Widows. So between the Mark of the Black Widows, Codex of Frailty, and Take Up the Mantle, like I just had so much disruption in my deck. This was during like the Syndra meta when she was like the top deck. So having that kind of like really high disruption density made me feel really good into these kind of aggro matchups. And also people were preparing and like teching for like the Dagger build. So like bringing in stuff like Warmongers and Ripple Aways that just weren't really as effective against my build. And yeah, so that's kind of how I got started with this kind of archetype, like running Take Up the Mantle with like a bit of a Dagger package. And basically, like throughout my testing, I found that I was trying to run a similar build for my for the calling this time, but I was finding that like taking out the Daggers completely, the Dagger reactions just takes away a lot of your agency in a lot of matchups. So I put those back in, squeezed everything in, and like miraculously was able to fit all the stuff I wanted to run in my 80. And yeah, so here we are. This is the kind of the deck I ended up with. I'm really pleased with it. Really happy with how it performed. I'd probably run a similar, like if not the exact same 80 again if I had to run it back.
Yeah, it's awesome to hear. Like I try to write the important things out. If I remember correctly now, like the first thing is that you get a lot of flexibility, not having to use the Mask of Deceit to get an orb as quickly as possible, because if you have the mask left over, for example, an explosive Black Widow turn or a Tarantula turn or Trapdoor turn, there it's so nice to have that mask to rely on when you really need it. And if you're forcing yourself into having to use it to get an early Orb Weaver, you lose that possibility, that option. So that's a big thing. And then you said yourself, you didn't have to include poppers or like tech cards like Amulet of Echoes, and you're better suited against aggro with like more disruption, more 3 blocks, and you're also less susceptible to hate cards or your opponent's tech cards. Did I get that right?
Yeah, yeah, those are some of the big reasons. Another reason as well that I forgot to mention in like kind of my initial explanation. One of the nice things about running all these stealth cards is the density of 3 blocks that you have. So when you're running all the Dagger stuff, like your deck kind of necessarily has a lot of these 2 blocks in the deck, and those kind of restrict what blocking patterns you can take.
Yes.
So I find that like when you're running more 3 blocks, like if you have a hand that's like a bunch of stealth stuff, it's really easy to like kind of like determine like what kind of hand you want to play on the clapback. I like having that kind of bulk of having all these extra 3 blocks. And especially now, like in this meta, when the aggro decks like Fi aren't really presenting many on hits. It's not about the break points. It's more about just getting good value on your blocks. Having those 3 blocks is really powerful in my experience.
Yep. And it's I hear you. It's such a bad feeling have to block CNC with more than 3 cards. If you don't have enough 3 blocks, and it's an awful feeling to having to pitch like to make your 4 power Dagger buffs usable. You have to pitch a red card, attack the Graphene without go again. It doesn't feel very well. When everything works out with Dagger build, it's awesome, but sometimes it doesn't. It doesn't feel like you have that much agency. It doesn't feel like the deck does what you wanted to do. So I really, that's why I really liked this idea when I saw it, and I liked your deck list when I saw it. But I'm gonna come back. We're gonna come back to like individual card choices, or rather the cards that you chose not to include after we're going through the deck list. So I'm just gonna scroll through this somewhat quickly because there are a couple of staples in here that you see in like every Mario iteration. A couple that stands out to me that is not commonly used in every deck these days are like Blue Mask of the Black Widow, another blue stealth card. And you decided to use two of each, Reaper's Call and Under Trapdoor. And have you been happy with your choice of 1 power blues? Like Prognosis is very common, so I didn't mention that. But were you happy with the blue marks and two split of Reaper's Call and Under Trapdoor?
Yeah, I think that the blues are probably one area that I could probably see some improvements being made. I think the weakest blue out of this suite is probably the Mark of the Black Widows.
Yeah.
I was just running those because like my kind of philosophy is that in some matchups you just need as much disruption as possible. And the reason why I'm running all these 1-cost blues is because they all Take Up the Mantle. So basically, it's like if you ponder a blue, it's not the end of the world. And Mark of the Black Widow is like one of the better blues you can ponder in this deck, especially since you're trying to kind of take advantage of that disruption. But besides that, Mark of the Black Widow is probably a bit of an underperformer for me. I feel like the times I sent it, I wasn't really super thrilled about it, but it does the job. Just gets an extra, basically forces a card out of your opponent's hand a lot of the time. But Reaper's Call is a card that really impressed me. I've been off the card for a while, but I think that one of the downsides of kind of playing this Take Up the Mantle style of Mario is you don't have as much flexibility with your blues. So I know a lot of people like to run like Blue Shred, Blue Stains the Red back, and there's like lots of different like utility blues that you can kind of run in these slots. But with Take Up the Mantle, you really need that high stealth count to make sure that your Take Up the Mantles can actually be used. And Reaper's Call is kind of a good compromise in that middle ground where you can play it as a 1-cost stealth attack if you need to, but if not, you can also use it to mark your opponent, which also when you're playing lots of stealth cards, having good markup time is absolutely critical.
Yeah.
So I was really impressed with the Reaper's Calls this weekend. I've even considered running 3 in future versions of the deck, especially because I'm thinking of probably increasing the blue count a little bit. But yeah, Reaper's Call is a very impressive card. It's one of those cards that you don't really realize how useful it is until you draw it in the perfect situation. And
turn 0 is pretty awesome.
Yeah, so it's like situations like that. It's like you draw it turn 0, and it's like the best card ever. It's like you're going second, your opponent's going first. You get to start with a mark. Sometimes you draw it. Like it wasn't at this tournament, but I was at an RTN where I was facing a Gravy Bones opponent, and I was able to use Reaper's Call to mark my opponent and use my helmet to search up an inertia trap with Trapdoor on their Conqueror of the Seas, and that was able to like kind of like get that D-React out of their arsenal to open them up for some more damage later on. So Reaper's Calls is kind of like super clutch in like a lot of these weird scenarios. Another really nice situation that I like the Reaper's Calls in is against Verdansk specifically. A lot of the times you'll sometimes like kind of like a lot of times you'll use cut from the same cloth, and you'll see that she has like these prevention effects, and your hand really needs to get the mark off. Like if you have like a double Saber Bloodshed turn, or you need to get these extensions or like Stains the Red back, stuff like that, and you know you're not going to be able to get the mark with a flick, Reaper's Call is able to kind of bail you out in those situations.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I've even seen people using Praise Spotters for that exact reason. But I think this seems like a lesser investment than having that helm instead of mask in that matchup.
Yeah. I'm one of the Praise Spotters enjoyers. I was testing that card a lot into the Verdansk matchup. That was one of the matchups I was really working on before the event. And Praise Spotter is really powerful, but I think that Mask of Deceit is like such a powerful effect, especially without the Orb Weavers. Like you kind of just need to run that card. And Verdansk is running so many attacks now that like the upside is a bit more limited. I was finding that before, like when she was more commonly on like Channel Millennium trees, she'd be able to kind of just not attack me, and then my mask was looking kind of bad. But now that she's running like Cadaverous Tillings and new Elemental Strikes, you can get a lot of value out of your mask in that matchup.
It's very likely that you will have a window to get Inertia Trap with Mask. Yeah. It's at least a 8 value play. Most of the time I say it's a really good one. And moving on in the list, you run into a CNC, not that fancy, Too Fate for a Scene, and this is a new one, which I really like. Can you talk a bit
Yeah.
about this inclusion.
So this is hyperinflation. I'm going to shout out my friend Matt if he's watching this video. He's the one that kind of told me that this was a good card. And I didn't really believe him at first. Like, this card doesn't look super assuming at first. I think a lot of people have kind of been overlooking this card. But after I was playing it, I was realizing that like I was just happy to see this card pretty much every single time. It's just such a powerful effect, and when you kind of look at it for what it is, it's just zero cost, four attack, go again with 3 block. Like, it's just extremely like powerful like numbers on the card, and that's not even considering the effect as well. In this deck, the deck is kind of built to be able to kind of take advantage of, or not take advantage of, like kind of sidestep the downside of the effect. So, like for example, when you're playing like the stuff like with more stealth heavy configuration, you'll find that there aren't a lot of good opportunities to use your tunic. Like the most, like especially because the graphene's not as powerful, since you're not running as many pumps, you're not running the dagger reacts in a lot of matchups. So you're kind of have this like floating tunic counter a lot of the time. And hyperinflation kind of gives you like good usage out of those, so you can like throw like a hyperinflation and then like tunic throw leave no witnesses, stuff like that. But yeah, like I think that this card, people kind of focus on like, oh, like what if my opponent has no D-reacts? But if they have no D-reacts, like the card is still good as a 0, like for 4 go again, as long as you can kind of have the resource curve not to trip yourself up on it. Because like, so there's lots of situations, like one of the matchups I think that this card really shines in is against Verdance. So like a play pattern that I like to do against Verdance is I'll go like play a pump, swing my clay for 5, and that kind of puts her in this position where she wants to block it for 2. And then if you follow up with the hyper, like she'll want to block it with 2, holding up a D-react to defend from your follow-ups. And then you play the hyperinflation, and that just like throws a wrench completely in her plans. Yep. And since you're throwing the clay, you'll have a resource left over, so you can even follow it up with like a stealth attack after as well.
I think it's a really important thing. Like of course, what you're looking for with this is to strand your opponent with D-reacts they have to pay for. And it's such a big difference sending this with Tunic for Lead No Witness if they have a 1 or more D-reacts. It's such an annoying thing to play against. And I am actually surprised that we didn't see more of this, because I would expect this to be more played in the Dagger-centric version, because you can front pump and play this. I don't have extensive testing, so it might be worse in practice than in theory. But I really like the thought of this. Actually, what I have had, the biggest thing I had against this card has been the chaos part, or rather, it isn't an assassin card. That comes up every now and then. It can be very frustrating not having this as a discard outlet for whatever you're trying to do with your spider forms. But apart from that, I really like this card. It's a good one.
Yeah, it's just a really powerful extender, and like even as an extender, like sometimes you can't really like afford to pay for the tax on the resources that it gives you, so you can even use it as a finisher too. Like just ending your turn where it's like you go like dagger and then throw a hyperinflation at the end can be really crushing. This card also is like the most insane hit off of Codex of Inertia, because like you hit the Codex of Inertia, you throw the hyperinflation, then you throw the graphene, and it's like so backbreaking for so many decks. And then if it strands them with a D-react as well, it's even better.
That's a really good one, and you don't have to be. It can be very annoying if you like commit to a stealth card, mainly what's it faced, Mark of the Black Widow or Lead No Witness, and you really hope that the opponent does not have the D-react. You can safeguard from that by using this, and you don't have to be as afraid of flicking to make a Mark of Black Widow active, for example. I mean, they can still play it, but it's a bigger commitment, so it does something. So I really like this one. Would you consider moving up to 3, or is 2 the right number?
I've been considering 3, but I think that this card just like really shines as a 2 of. It felt like at 2 copies, like I was really drawing it at the perfect frequency, because this is not a card that you want to see 2 copies of in your hand. And like a general like deck building heuristic that I kind of apply is if I don't want 2 copies in my hand, I only play 2 copies in my deck. And that kind of like reduces these kinds of bad duplicate situations, because like drawing 2 hyperinflations is just not where you want to be.
Yeah, it makes sense. And regarding the traps, you run a 2-1 split with 2 of Inertia, 1 Leather Spider. Is there anything you would reconsider about this?
Yeah, I think the only thing I would consider is maybe running more Lair of the Spiders. I think that might just be a meta call. That card just always like impresses me whenever I see it. I think that like with my traps, I kind of built them with the mirror in mind, because I was doing some mirror practice with some strong assassin players, And I was finding that like I just kind of was lacking in the D reacts in an earlier version of the deck. So I've kind of tried to optimize, like, because since you're trying to fit like kind of two decks in one with this list, is I'm kind of trying to be able to play as strong of a dagger package as I can, while also being able to kind of shift into this disruptive stealth, take up the mantle deck. It's really hard to like fit all the cards that you want to run in the 80. So one of the areas that I think I kind of like lighten the bear on, or lighten the load on the 80 on, was the traps. I was running two layer the traps initially, or layer the spiders, just because, especially like I said, like when you're playing in the mark stance, or even when you're playing with daggers, marking your opponent on their turn and starting your turn with an opponent mark can like really lead to like snowballing your markup time, because it lets you throw that graphene first. And you kind of open up with the graphene chelicera, and then that kind of gives you the option of finishing the turn with your hunter's clave. And I find that like you can't, like in most games, you need that one moment where you can mark your opponent on their turn, and then suddenly they're just marked for the rest of the game. And Lair the Spider is one of the best ways of doing that. And I just really like this card. I think this card's really powerful into Fi. I think this card's really powerful into like most aggro decks, honestly. Like, it's just not a card that you're sad to see when you draw it usually. But so I would like to run two, but in this deck I just wasn't able to fit it. I had other stuff I needed to run.
Would you remove, if you would have to include a second copy, would you remove Inertia Trap or one of the 4D reacts?
I think like me, I might be convinced to go down on one of the D-Reacts, but I think I'd like to find, I kind of like the amount of D-Reacts I'm running. I could be convinced to go down on a D-React, especially if like Mario is like less of a popular deck and I can reduce my shelter from the storms. But I think two Inertia Traps is kind of a good place to be. I can see the argument being made for three, but two is just so powerful. Like, it's just such an insane card in so many matchups.
Yeah.
And I was finding that before I was getting really greedy with my traps. I was just running one. I was running one Inertia Trap, and then I was just running that into every matchup. And just if I turn into Trapdoor, I just find it. But putting in like the second Inertia Trap kind of like reduces the amount of games where you just lose because you turn into Trapdoor and you have no traps left in your deck. Yeah. So I like, there's some matchups where you can only really run Inertia Trap. Maybe you can run Den the Spider, but in the traps or in the matchups where your opponents are kind of pumping up their attacks, the Inertia Trap is like such a powerful card. Like Guardians, Verdance, even Warriors. So I wouldn't see myself running less than two.
And I think there are many considerations to be made regarding the traps when you have this as well. You chose to run this as a 2 of, and I've seen it as a 3 of in many decks for a while now, because I think this is a really, really good one as well.
Yeah.
As you said, this is at worst, this is a stealth card that you can mantle. It's not the one you would pick to put in your arsenal, but it's usually fine. It's not the worst, and the effect can be so awesome in many ways, especially like more narrow cases, like you can use this for a dominated attack and for a pulping if you for some reason would have to face that. But if there are, when you've been playing this for a while, you will find scenarios that you didn't expect when this is really, really good. And especially if you have like the perfect trap. Inertia is usually the main one, but this is really, really good as well.
Yeah.
So if you can start your turn with opponent marked, things get so much easier.
I agree. Yeah, I find like that's why I like running two Lair of the Spiders, because I find that Lair of the Spider, like, so Inertia Trap is a better one to kind of like turn into with your hat. So if I'm using my Mask of Deceit and turning into Trapdoor, I'll almost always be finding an Inertia Trap. But like naturally drawing into a Lair of the Spider is just so powerful in so many matchups. And then like I even find that like a lot of times like I'm probably 50-50 in terms of how often I'm using the Under the Trapdoor on Lair of the Spider and Inertia Trap, like especially against a deck like Fi, where all their cards are going to have Go again. Being able to mark them for free is just super, super powerful.
That's a good one. And speaking of mark, using Mark the Prey as well. I really like this card. And can you talk us through what are the like main purposes of Mark the Prey?
So this card is kind of like, so basically I find that if you want to run the Take Up the Mantles, you don't quite have enough red stealth attacks to round out your deck. And I was talking about the mark uptime as well. Like that was kind of a big weakness I found earlier in PQ season previously, was that like my deck didn't have enough mark, so I was flicking my daggers too quickly, and then I'd run out of daggers and I would lose the game. So Mark the Prey is kind of like one of my solutions to that. This card is like super, super powerful in Mario, because like, so it's another one of those like versatile cards. Like you might see a common theme in my deck building is I try to have these cards that can be versatile and flexible, that have different use cases and can kind of fit different hand textures, and Mark the Prey is one of them. It can be an extender or even an opener in some matchups. Like in a matchup like Syndra, like she can't really afford to block a Mark the Prey for 4 at the start of her turn, or even in the middle of the chain. So that's almost always going to be hitting. And ending your turn on this card is like super powerful as well. So like for example, like I bring in a copy against Verdance, or taking out a copy of Mark the Black Widow, because it's just like a surprise factor where like decks that kind of expect the dagger game plan aren't really prepared to like will kind of block, assuming that you're only going to be swinging 2 daggers this turn, and then the Mark the Break comes out, and then that kind of changes everything. And it's also just like a really powerful card, like in terms of like Take with the Mantle, because it's a card that like it doesn't immediately signal that you're going to be throwing a Take with the Mantle, because that's the thing is like if I open up my turn, I have a 4 card hand, and I throw Under the Trapdoor, it's pretty obvious I'm going to be Take with the Mantling you. But Mark the Prey is like a card that can kind of keep that kind of concealed information. It doesn't really telegraph what I'm going to be doing next. And I've even, I think, in the calling, I forget which match it was, but I think I've definitely, I turned into, I mantled into Mark the Prey, because that was just a good way to kind of set up the mask. So that was one thing as well with the deck is like, we're talking about the markup time. And one of the upsides of having this Take with a Mantle package is that you're less reliant on the graphene, so you don't really need to use your Master Turn to the Orbi Reform as frequently. So being able to kind of like finish your turn with a Mark the Prey lets you use that hat later in the game. So if you need to like get that clave and you're using the clave to kind of get your disruption through or get go again on your self attacks, and you consume it earlier on the turn, and Mark the Prey kind of allows you to reapply it, so you can kind of set yourself up to mask on the next turn.
And I think that's an interesting point that I thought about now, that since you are coming back to the point that if you end your turn with the opponent marked, it's a lot easier to keep the ball rolling. And since you have so many 3 blocks in the deck, you're also fine with blocking whatever you need, and you can play small but very efficient hands. Like if you're whatever spider form, pretty much, and send the 0 for 4 with the threat of like a discard activation, it's a pretty annoying 2-card hand. In a vacuum, it's a good one. And if you could do that, keep the opponent marked, to turn it around a spider, I mean, it's really annoying to play against. In a sense, it's more concealed information than if you just pump a dagger and swing a big dagger, and the opponent has to consider, will he pump it even more?
Yeah.
The on hits are a lot harder to play against, I'd say. So I like this. Yeah. I like that's the thing I like about stealth build. It's tougher. And speaking of on hits, last time I had Mr. Lowell, who was the run rep at another calling a couple of months back before New Year. He didn't include this card, and I asked him why, and he said, you probably will miss whatever you want from this, and you will be sad. Can you give us your thoughts about Meat Madness?
Yeah, so Meat Madness is kind of, so he's right. Sometimes you're just going to miss it and it's going to be sad. Like if you ever hit the top of the deck and you're kind of banking on not doing that, like you just kind of, it's really bad. It hurts. But the thing is like with this card, like having disruption that doesn't rely on mark is a really powerful effect for Arachne Marionette. And it makes decisions for your opponent very difficult on blocking. Because a lot of times it's like, if you throw this and you have your black text up and another card in your hand, you're able to threaten that kind of activation. And even if your opponent has no arsenal, so obviously the best situation to like throw this card if you're trying to get disruption is when your opponent has an arsenal. It gives you a 2/3 chance of having some card ripped away from them with the on hit. But if you're using it and your opponent only has is trying to hold onto a 4-card hand, and you play this card and you have another card behind it, and you're able to threaten that black text, it can be really scary. And sometimes you hit that the 1 in 3 chance, and you hit the hand, even when they have no arsenal. And the card just seems really powerful in those situations. And I think that's just one of the big weaknesses of Arachne Marionette is how reliant the deck is on having the mark up to enable our disruption. So this kind of gives you an option where you don't need a mark to disrupt your opponent. And another thing too with this deck is, especially when I'm like I don't really bring this card in when I'm mostly daggers, but one of the problems I've had with Arachne in the past is my Codex of Frailties can sometimes be hard to play, especially if I haven't seen like a Leave No Witnesses or a Kiss of Death like earlier on in the game. And cards like Meat Madness and Mark the Prey, like those are just really good like extra options off your Codex of Frailties. I was even, so I think that's another one of the upsides as well, is you have more versatility with your codex and you're able to play them out more frequently in the early game. And Meat Man is just a really, really good option off of a Codex, especially if your opponent's marked. It does a really good impression of being a Leave No Witnesses.
Yeah.
So I've been really impressed with the card generally. I don't run it into every matchup. That's why it's in the inventory. But in matchups where like there are matchups like right now where it's like there's Phi, there's Acilio, and there's just these decks that like their game plan is to just blow you up with a 5-card hand and do like 35 damage, and you need to be able to have that kind of on-demand arsenal disruption. And I think that Meat Madness is pretty much the best option for that. So like into Acilio and Phi, like this card just a super all-star, and happy 3 of for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I have liked this big card from the beginning because I like the design of it in many ways. But then I didn't realize how often I would love the fact that you didn't have to mark your opponent for this to have an effect. And I mean, it's a hard thing to put a number on, but it is a very good card to tilt your opponent with as well. Because they will have some serious issues deciding if they want to block this or not. There are like so many scenarios where they feel like I can't do it right. The best thing is probably to block this out, or the best thing is probably to let this hit and hope that whatever Mario wishes for doesn't happen. But it's a very good one in the sense that it's taxing for the opponent to make decisions around.
Yeah, for sure. And another thing as well is it's a fun card to play with too. As the Mario player, this is one of those cards that kind of gives you agency over the game, and it kind of creates these outplay opportunities because when you play this card, you can kind of know that your opponent's likely to let it hit if they don't have an arsenal, and they're likely to block it if they do have an arsenal.
Yep.
So like keeping that in mind, like is kind of how you kind of unleash the potential of this card, and it's something that you kind of need to play with for a bit to learn like kind of how you can kind of juice like the maximum upside out of it, because like being able to kind of like know how your opponents and predict how your opponent's going to block is going to affect your sequencing, and this is one of the cards that kind of allows you to abuse that and gets more edge in your games.
Yep, it's a good point as well. You didn't say in what matchups are you not running this? Verdansk?
Yeah, I don't run this into Verdansk. I don't run this into Guardians. I have all the matchups that I was playing in the deck list.
Yep.
But there's a lot of matchups I don't run it. But yeah, basically it's I found myself basically like going for daggers in matchups where the disruption wasn't what wins me the game. And this card like, so you can kind of think of this deck as having 2 main sideboard packages for the most part, which is the 3 Meat Madnesses and the 3 Take Up the Mantles when I'm trying to like be like more stealthy, more disruptive, and then the dagger reactions when I'm trying to play like more of a value game. So this kind of comes in when I'm trying to disrupt my opponent.
Yep. All right. Then our pick up the point, I'd say 1 pick up the point is somewhat standard. It's great to have a good codex target when you desperately need that retrieve, for example.
Yeah. I do want to highlight that in this deck, the pick up the points are very important, especially if you're playing like in that more stealth heavy configuration. Because this card will just win you the game sometimes, like it'll just bail you out. Because sometimes you just need to flick your second clave. You just have a hand that like does not convert well. Like that's one of the major weaknesses of the stealth build, is you just find yourself with too many stealth attacks in your hand and no way to mark your opponent. And that can be kind of hard. You might even end up IPing yourself. So pick up the points is kind of one of those cards that gives you like that extra flexibility in terms of like how you play out your hands and when you use your second flick. Because what I like to do is I kind of like to track how many upsticks and runs and how many pick up the points I've seen and how many I have left in my deck. And then I can kind of make like a risk-based assessment on if I'm going to be flicking that second clave. So like if I have like a Savor Bloodshed turn and I know that I've got 3 copies of my retrieves left, it's about turn 7 or 8, I'm pretty likely to see one coming up soon. So you can kind of use that to kind of get greedy and flick the second clave. And yeah. And like you said, it's a really good card off the Codex. And I was talking earlier about how sometimes when you're playing with stealth cards, you don't have good tunic outlets, and this is one of them. So this kind of allows you to kind of pick up that second clave, and you're really threatening again.
Yeah. I was just one of the things I was curious about is how liberal are you usually with flicking away your second clave, because that's it's an important thing to have that second clave for when you draw the next Take Up the Mantle. But would you say, is that a thing? I mean, it's a hard question. How liberal are you with flicking your second clave? Of course, it depends. But can you say something in general?
I think that's honestly like one of the hardest decision points, and one of like the things that makes Mario such like a difficult deck to pilot is, do you flick that second clave? And I think it's like it's just so contextual, and it requires so much like information about the game state to determine if it's correct or not. But I think that something Cashy said that kind of resonated with me on the Discord. I just saw like a random message. He said that basically you only flick it when it changes the outcome of the game. And I find that kind of rings true to me, where it's like you don't necessarily need to get the full value out of all your cards. Like if you're in a position where you're ahead, flicking that second clave can turn that game from a winning game to a losing game when your hand is bricks, you have a bunch of blues and you can't convert them. But sometimes like when you have a double saver bloodshed turn and you're behind, that could be one of the things that brings you back in the game. So like flicking the second clave, I'm very conservative about, and when I'm playing the stealth build, I'm even conservative with flicking the first clave. I know a lot of Marionette players like love to just like if they're going first, like they'll just flick on the first turn and make space for the graphene.
Yes.
But when you're not playing the dagger stuff in this build, the graphene isn't super useful. So it's really powerful to kind of sit on both your daggers, and also staying in base form is pretty good too, because that's kind of how you can kind of convert these like wide stealth hands, and like the most insane hands in the deck are when you can just play like a bunch of stealth cards and all the on hits like start to come together. So yeah, so I guess I'd say like I'm pretty conservative with my flicking. I try to only use it when it's like super impactful and can win me the game. And also like I try not to do it, especially into a deck like Verdance, who has like all this like all these ways to prevent the flick. I try to kind of clear the way, like make sure I know what the hand is looking like before I do that, because one of the fast ways to lose the game is to flick Verdance turn 0 and get Shelter from the Stormed. Like that's just so crushing.
It's awful. And when I saw this deck list, I was a bit afraid of the low blue count, especially when I expected or wanted to swing with Clave. I thought that I would be even more dependent on Graphene because of the pretty low resource, low number of blues in the deck. But then I realized, since you're attacking so much with stealth, you don't have the need for pitch the same way. And that's an important thing that I didn't think about before I had a couple of games with the deck list.
Yeah, no, that is definitely something to consider as well. And yeah, like the thing with this deck is that like the curve is a bit weird, especially once you're bringing in to take up the mantles. Like if you're playing in that kind of stealth mode, most of my commentary is kind of like based on that, since I feel like that's the most people know what the dagger build's trying to do. So I'll talk more on the stealth side of things. But when you're playing like to take up the mantles, like you're adding 3 extra yellows into your deck, and that's kind of what enables me to play Command and Conquer. I think that's a card that like I've seen a lot of Arachne Marionette players like kind of skipping on, but I think that card is like extremely powerful in this meta, and especially with like hyperinflation, which can strand like D-reacts in your opponent's arsenal. Yes. And hyperinflation curves into CNC like pretty nicely. If you have a blue in your hand, you just go hyperinflation through the CNC. I did that to Avalda, and that's how I got the Crown of Providence out of the way. But yeah, like I find that like with the deck, like especially like once you're playing like more stealth heavy and less dagger heavy, between the tunic, being able to pitch with a red to swing your clave, and all the extra yellows you're running, it's pretty easy to kind of swing the clave when you need to.
And was an interesting thing. I would say it's somewhat standard to use 3 of each of scar tissue and to the point. But in your sideboard guide, there were a couple of matchups. I think, for example, against KO, you rather run to the point instead of scar tissue, which surprised me a bit. I would expect the value of extending a mark to be higher than the possibility of +1 into the point. But are there like what's your reason in bringing to the point rather than scar tissue?
Yeah. So the reason for bringing it to the point is because of the synergy that it has with Take Up the Mantle. So if I'm so in a match, like in matches where I'm bringing in those 2 to the points, like for example, like KO, that's a matchup where I'm playing all my stealth cards. I want to have as much disruption as possible, and to the point is just a really good way to close out the game. And those are the kind of games where it's like every life point matters, every point of value matters. And like I think one of my losses in the event was to a KO. And yeah, like you just kind of need that extra reach sometimes. And when your opponent is marked, it kind of gives you this like really surprise amount of damage, where you can kind of like if you turn your blue into a Kiss of Death and then you throw it to the point on it, you just added like 9 damage onto your chain link. So you can really add like a ton of damage, and it's just a really impressive amount, and it's just a really good way to close out games. Yeah, and like just that's it's kind of your finisher in that deck. Like Scar Tissue is not as good at killing your opponent. Scar Tissue is kind of better in like the mid game, but when I'm trying to use these cards as a ways of like ending the game, like throwing my Graphene, flicking my Clave, and then using it to the point is a good way to do so.
Yeah. Okay. And rounding out, there are one of Sigil of Solace. How and why do you use this?
Yeah, that's just a card that I kind of nodded in respect to Wizards. Basically, like that's my silver bullet that I have space for. Like I have 79 cards that I felt like I needed to run, and then this is kind of like that extra one where I wanted to kind of increase my percentages in some matchups. And I just think the card's really good against Verdance, and I think the card's really good against Acilio. It's just kind of a way that you're able to like when especially like so against Verdance, like obviously the card's really good. Her game plan is kind of bring you down to 9, and just kind of getting that extra 3 points of life. Like having a turn where it's like you just block out a Felling of the Crown and then play Sigil of Solace is like a really powerful play line against Verdance. It's also pretty good as like baiting. Baiting out like her plow unders and denying value from that. So the card can do some interesting things, and I think just having like that kind of extra life just wins games sometimes in those scrambles. And against Acilio as well, like I'm playing this kind of the more stealth heavy configuration of my build. And since I'm playing so much disruption, like my games with Acilio like are less frequently ending in me getting nuked for 50 because I'm able to kind of disrupt him every single turn if I want to. So it's kind of he's kind of forced into playing this more mid-rangey game. And even after like if he was able to get like a combo off with this Lightning Greaves turn, using the Sigil of Solace can allow me to like extend like my life in the end game, so I'm less likely to die to like a couple sigils into a shock. So I like this card. It's pretty good. Not the best card in the deck. Like probably one of the cards that I think is cuttable and movable, but
Like the 80th best card.
Yeah, this card was definitely the 80th one added into the list, I think.
And you decided to run 2 Codex of Inertia.
Yep.
How would you say this card plays out in the more stealth-heavy build rather than the dagger-focused one?
I pretty much only play the Codex of Inertias in the Dagger heavy build. The only matchup I think I'm playing Stealth and Codex of Inertias in is Acilio, because it's so important to kind of try and keep them off that arsenal. But I think that this card was honestly one of my big like underperformers for the weekend. Yeah, like the 2 Codex of Inertias and the Sigil of Solace, that was just kind of my way of anticipating a lot of Verdance. I know that Verdance is always going to be like a super popular deck at any event I go to. I don't know how strong the deck is, but I know I'm going to see a lot of it. Yep. And that's just kind of a matchup where like running these cards like makes a really big difference in that one specific matchup. And I just find it really good into those kinds of decks. But I think like in general, like Codex of Inertia, the role is a bit different when you're playing more stealth cards, because usually you want to play it like when you're like about to swing your Graphene Chelicera, but when you're playing it with like the stealth cards, you're kind of hoping more to kind of hit one of your attack actions in the deck. Since you're running so many, you just kind of want to like play all your stuff out, and then once your hand is empty, you just play the Codex of Inertia, and hopefully you draw like a pain in the backside or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is another one of those cards where it's like this is another card that kind of synergizes well with like Mark the Prey. We were talking about that card earlier. Like that card is just like a really really insane hit off your Codex of Inertias. But yeah, for the most part, like I'm also using this like with the standard Dagger stuff, just as kind of a hull breaker for matchups that like to sit on a D-React in Arsenal. But yeah, wasn't super crazy about the card this weekend, but I think that this card is kind of a necessary evil. The Verdance matchup becomes so difficult if you're not running it.
You said that there are a couple of like sideboard cards clumped together that you play them alongside, and you said you rarely combine. How did you put it? You rarely combine a stealth heavy build with Codex of Inertia. Did I get that correctly?
Yeah, For the most part, the only matchup where I'm playing both Stealth and Codex of Inertia is Acilio, if I recall correctly. But yeah.
Should we look through like? Do you have a good example of where you play a dagger heavy build? What matchup would that be?
Yeah, you can switch over into the Verdance. Like that'll just be a good example of what the matchup looks like. Yeah. So yeah, like this is what my deck kind of looks like against Verdance. The only things that are a bit different than what most people would be used to with what they're running in their stealth builds, or with their dagger builds, is I'm running the hyperinflations. Like that card is just so insane in the matchup. Yep. Same with the Command and Conquer. Like Those cards I just think are really, really powerful into Verdansk. I think that the trick to beating Verdansk is just kind of have to like play a lot of the matchup, and you kind of learn how she wants to block. Her hands don't really do anything unless she's playing a 2-card hand. So these are kind of your tools into getting her into unfavorable blocking situations where she has to either choose to have no turn or give you or take a bunch of damage. And yeah, this matchup I do bring in the Take Up the Mantles, but it's not usually the card. I'm not usually playing the Take Up the Mantles. It's like you said, like that's kind of a card that we're using as like a resource. I'm using it to pitch a lot in this matchup, and then sometimes you just win the game. Like that's kind of what this card does. Is if it's not finishing off the Verdansk, it's like the marks are so premium where it's really hard to line up. This is why I only bring in 2 copies. But yeah, this card just usually just is a good way to pay for your cards. And if you scroll up a little bit, you'll notice that I'm running 3 Mark of the Black Widows in this plan, but like on the night before, the night before I kind of realized that like Mark the Prey was a really strong card in the matchup. So the only thing different between this and what I was actually running at the tournament was I was running 1 Mark the Prey and 2 Mark of the Black Widows.
Okay, I was about to ask you about these because these has been iffy at best playing against Verdansk, I'd say. I mean, they can be good in the later parts of the game, but until they're online, this is more a liability than anything else. So
yeah, I definitely like don't love this card in the matchup. And running a Mark the Prey or even 2 instead of Mark the Black Widow like feels pretty powerful. Just because like she hates being marked so much. Getting those extra on hit mark effects are really good.
Yeah, I get that. So, and we say this is somewhat like a standard Dagger, the Dagger version of the deck. And if we were to switch over to a more like stealth oriented, let's say, I guess Syndra.
Sure, yeah, Syndra will do.
One. So you're still running hyperinflation. It's because you expect them to run a couple of D-reacts, or is it because of the 3? Okay, it's the D-reacts rather than the 3 blocks.
No, like most Syndra, like that's the thing. That's the nice thing about hyperinflation is like you know that most of your opponents are going to be playing 60 reacts at the minimum into you. And Syndra's one of those that like you'll pretty much always see that in their list. And the thing is like this card's nice in the stealth builds because it helps you convert your hands. So like sometimes against a Syndra, like you kind of rip her whole hand away and she's forced to block out, and then hyperinflation is just a good way to kind of keep the pain going. Or you just finish off your hand, like throw hyperinflation. And at the end of the day, it's a 3 block. So if I need to block with it, I can.
It's a low risk card to include, pretty much.
Yeah.
It's a good one. And I mean, everything looks standard, if you could say that. Like you're using like a full package of D-reacts, the Fateful Scene shelters, all the traps. Most stuff block 3 with a couple of exceptions. And you remove in the sideboard, you remove like the front pump cuts, 2 block, 2 block, 2 blocks, 0 blocks. So
like hyperinflation. Hyperinflation is not the best card in this matchup. I would be running the black text. It's just in the inventory, but didn't have that included. But yeah, hyperinflation is not the best card in this matchup. But again, like that's just a card that like I'm okay seeing, and I think I'd rather have it than any of these other cards against Syndra, especially just by virtue of it being a 3 block. Like for Syndra and Dio, where it's like really important to hit those breakpoints sometimes, you just need that high density of 3 blocks. But there are better cards around the matchup, but hyperinflation does the trick, and it's good.
Yeah, I see that. And if we move back to like the base phase of the deck, what would you say were like the over and underperformers?
Yeah, so overperformers, definitely Command and Conquer and Hyperinflation deserve a shout out for that. Those cards are just so impressive and won me so many games. I think Command and Conquer is just like a really, really nice card to be running right now. Like Acilio really doesn't want to be seeing it. Like the amount of times that I hit a wobble in their arsenal with a Command and Conquer is a very satisfying experience. Yeah. And Hyperinflation as well is just like a card that like once you play with it, like it's just doing it. You just realize how much it's doing for you every time you see it. So those cards are both really good. Take the Mantle again, like that's another card that's just like absolutely incredible. Like if you're looking at like for example like when we were looking at my Cinder matchup, I've got 3 red Mark of the Black Widows, 3 blue Mark of the Black Widows, Codex, Leave No Witnesses, Command and Conquer, and then all the Take Up the Mantles, Meet Madnesses. Like you're running like almost like 25 cards that are able to just beat Disruption on demand. So Take Up the Mantles were really strong. I think what other cards did I think are really good this weekend? Um, Reaper's Call. I had a lot of good Reaper's Call plays. Yeah, I was facing a Marlin, and I got to play Reaper's Call turn 0, and that kind of baited her into attacking me, and that led to her getting inertia trapped as well. So like the Reaper's Call, so the Reaper's Call, like just like discarding on turn 0 is just like such a like a powerful thing to do. And yeah, against like Verdance as well. Like we were talking about this earlier in the video, we were talking about like flicking the second clave, and Reaper's Call is just a way to like not have to do that in some hands. So when you need like that kind of emergency mark, it's a powerful card. But yeah, I think those were probably the cards I would say were the overperformers. Some of the underperformers, I think Sigil of Solace, like I wasn't too in love with. I don't think it actually moved the needle in any of my games. I think maybe I'd like to probably switch for a card that can kind of convert better on offense. But yeah, my Verdance games like were all like super easy, so I kind of didn't really feel the need, like the pressure where I needed that extra life total. But the another card that kind of underperformed is Pick Up the Point. As much as I love that card, and one copy like to give you that kind of extra density of pickups, feels powerful. But I think at the end of the day, like maybe I don't need it. Maybe I can kind of get away with being a bit more conservative with my flicks and maybe running a bit more mark. A card I've run in the past was like Pursuit to the Edge of Oblivion, which is a card some people may not have
Four
seen.
power one.
Yeah, this is zero for 4 on hit mark. So maybe that's a card that I run there instead. Because yeah, having that high amount of disruption density is really powerful. So that card might look better there. But Pick Up the Point I ran. It's also nice against Gravy. Kind of need these go again attacks for Gravy, but didn't love that card this weekend. Yeah, and the blue mark of the Black Widow. I think there were a couple turns where I just played a blue mark of the Black Widow just to be a blue mark of the Black Widow. So it comes up sometimes, but I think 3 copies is too many. I think I'd probably do better service like taking that out and switching it for either like a higher impact blue or maybe even another red somewhere.
But I'd say something about like the Pick Up the Point, and it's that if you're considering you have to cut one either cut Pick Up the Point or Sigil. I really want to include this in my decks often, but it's like this is rarely game breaking. I don't feel like this is a typical sideboard card. It is a good card in a couple of matchups, and it can be absolutely awesome if I do it at the right moment. But this is a tool in another sense. Once I've seen this, it's in my graveyard for that codex if I would have to use it. And the same thing can be said about like a couple of stealth cards, like 1 CNC, Death Touch, if that's included. I mean, once you have that, it gives you more options with like another couple of cards in your deck, and that can't be said about Sigil. So
yeah, yeah. The thing with the Codex, like I see what you mean with the Codex toolbox, and like that's definitely one of the upsides of Pick Up the Point is having that option of playing Pick Up the Point and grabbing a clave. It's especially nice like if you're playing like a matchup where your opponent's like bringing like overcrowdeds in. They can like if you codex and they're able to block whatever you throw at them. So you just kind of codex, grab your Pick Up the Point, take your dagger, and they block it with whatever card they bring out. So that could be a nice line in some matchups, and it does save your life sometimes, but definitely wasn't a card I was super excited about all weekend.
And speaking of matchups, what would you say are? You said at the beginning that like the main targets for the stealth build would be like aggro decks. Speaking about like the higher tiers of today's metagame, what would be like your main targets, and what are you less happy to see on the opposite side of the table?
Yeah. So I think that some of the concessions that you make by running both these things is that you kind of don't have as much like specific text space. So like for example, like I have no poppers, so Prism is a matchup I'm hoping to dodge. Not a ton of Prism, thankfully. Like the meta's pretty hostile to her, which is why I kind of like playing this kind of configuration where I'm not expecting to see a lot of her. But yeah, Prism's not a matchup I want to see. Another matchup that I don't want to see that was pretty popular this weekend. You couldn't tell like from the coverage and the final results in the top 8, but Valda had a really strong performance on a couple players. I think that's a deck to look out for, and that's a deck that's really hard for this deck to beat. I did pair up into one of them, and I had like an extremely close game, like that I won off the skin of my teeth. I ended up winning the game. Basically, she had a bunch of like I had I went down to one life. She had like 3 life, and then I was in my Orbeaver form, so I threw like a bunch of like little daggers at her and got her down to 1. And then Codex for hyperinflation was what won me the game because her hand she had a boulder drop in hand, and she had the D-react that like is reduced by the amount of seismic surges that you have in her arsenal. So because I was able to play hyperinflation off of my Codex, like she had to pitch her boulder drop to block it for lethal. So that was a pretty nice win I had there. But that matchup was really scary and not one that I wanna run into. Another one that I don't love to see is Ocilio. So this deck is teched pretty well for Ocilio. As far as the matchup goes, like my game plan is solid. I went 2-1 into the Ocilios this weekend. I think that being able to kind of sidestep a lot of the wobbles are not as effective against you, and you're able to kind of have this like really high disruption density with Take Up the Mantles makes the matchup feel a little bit better than if you're playing the pure dagger plan. But it's still a match that's scary, and it's still a match that like sometimes you just like lose and there's nothing you can do about it. Like I faced Michael Hamilton on the deck in round I think 11 or something, and yeah, his on his second turn of the game he did like 39 damage to me. So there's not much you can do
No, but
in
I mean,
situations like that.
yeah, at that point, I don't think it would matter what deck you were bringing. So,
Yeah.
but that's an important thing as well. Do you think that do you find the matchup more scary or bad?
I feel much more comfortable in the matchup like with this configuration just because you have like so much disruption. Because having like the fact that you have extra disruption means you're able to save disruption in your arsenal more frequently than you are if you're running like a lower density. Since if I have like 2 disruptive effects, let's say like I throw like a Meat Madness and then the Ocilio blocks it, I can now like arsenal the second one instead and have save that for a later turn because you can, like that was a matchup that I also did a lot of practice on leading up to the event, and you can kind of tell like as you start playing you kind of gain a sense as for when they're going to try and like blow you up. So that's like it's really important to time your disruption. Like I remember in my second Ocilio match that I won. I was sitting on a Codex and a Tunic for probably 7 or 8 turns. I just put them down like at the start of the game, and I just sat on them the entire game because this Cecilia was playing like very defensively and blocking me, and like wasn't really signaling to me that they were preparing for a combo. And I just had them in the arsenal, just waiting for the turn that they were starting to like take some damage, and then that was when I knew I had to rip it. I got hit by a wobble, but catching the wobble with the CNC or with the Codex was enough to kind of not get comboed next turn too. So just gets the cards out of the hand, which is what the goal is with the disruption at the end of the day.
Yeah. That's very disciplined of you. I mean, a case could be told for just trying to aggro them down before they get the combo together, but it's an interesting point that you bring up that it might actually be the right move to just park your safe disruption in Arsenal until you just actually need it.
Yeah. Yeah, like I'm like obviously the match where you're trying to kill them as quickly as you can, but I think another upside in that matchup as well for this deck, talking about the disruption, is since you're not using your mask to turn into Orb-Weaver as frequently, especially through the wobbles. Like in that matchup, if you're on the pure dagger plan, like you really want to turn into that Orb-Weaver so you don't get your Orb-Weaver wobbled, which is just like so backbreaking.
Yep.
If you need it for your turn. Being able to save it gives you kind of that second win con, and like the best way I find to beat Ocilios is setting up that something that you don't really see as frequently anymore, but turning into the Black Widow form and throwing a Kiss of Death at them.
Yeah,
like that
awesome.
is just like so absolutely devastating in that matchup
Yep.
for Ocilio, and being able to play without a graphene kind of allows you to take that line more frequently, which is I think how I won both of my games. I think I was able to do that kind of like Kiss of Death, flick the Kiss of Death combo, banish 2 cards in their hand. So this is a really powerful thing to do.
Yeah, it's a really good one. And how about like the more fatigue-oriented guardians? Pleiades, Jarl.
I honestly I don't have too much experience into those matchups. I didn't expect them to be very popular. I think like with the expected metagame at the calling, like I just didn't expect like those players to be pulling up or finding much success. I think the meta kind of just takes care of those decks for you. Like you don't really want to be playing as Pleiades when the room is full of Ocilios and the room is full of Arachne Marionettes. Like even like because the dagger build like is really strong into Pleiades, and the thing is like since I'm able to run all of the dagger cards, I feel like I'm as comfortable into those matchups as I would be on any other deck. Like having these extra cards are just cards that don't come in. Yeah, I don't love that matchup, but I don't find that matchup like super difficult. But those matchups are part of the reason why I brought the scar tissues and the points back in, because those cards are like really pivotal to like kind of like make sure you don't lose too much ground in those matchups.
Yeah, makes sense. And I thought about some cards, or it's easier that if you would like to begin with, what cards did you consider, but in the end decided against bringing in your 80?
Yeah, some cards I considered but ended up not bringing. Probably Death Touch is one that I know a lot of assassins like to play.
Yep.
I'm not a big fan of that card. I find that card can just be really clunky a lot of the time. Um, I don't know. I hate blocking with 2 blocks. Like if the card has a 2 in the bottom right, like I do not want to be blocking with it. So I find that's like a really difficult card to get into the graveyard a lot of time. And then you also have to like line up like having a resource into the codex. But yeah, I think Death Touch is a powerful card and it does powerful things. But I think that the matchups I would bring it in for, which would be like the fatiguey kind of guardians, warriors, and like Verdance. I'm running the Sigil of Solace and the Codex of Inertia as well. So like those are probably kind of like the areas that you kind of have room to maneuver if you want to fit a Death Touch in. But I didn't love the card. I found that when I was bringing it in, it was kind of like breaking up some of my hands. Like against Verdance, like I would just draw it and it would just be not the card I wanted to see, and that would be one of those turns where I had full tempo and needed to convert.
Yeah.
So didn't love the card a lot of the time in those matchups. And into Warriors now, I didn't expect Warriors to be super popular. So yeah, another thing, like another meta consideration, like people are just expecting lots of Phi, lots of Basilio. Like these are not decks that you want to be playing certain kind of matchups into, and Warrior's one of them. So I didn't see a lot of the. I didn't expect to see a lot of the decks that I thought Death Touch would be super useful in. So left that one out.
Did you see the game between Jacob Clements and I don't remember his name, the IRA player from Canada?
I've been meaning to watch that. I haven't had a chance. I've been pretty busy since I've gotten back. But yeah,
I mean, it's not. I guess it's not a spoiler for you know how it ended, but it's
yeah.
that would have been could have been a very different game if Jacob had access to CNC or Death Touch. I think.
Mm-hmm. I think that I definitely see the power of the card. I think that for my deck, the biggest problem with it is the overlap that I have with CNC.
Yeah.
And because a lot of the times where the Death Touch is going to be a good codex target, the CNC would also be a good codex target. So for my configuration, at least, I figured I considered that I had enough options for my codex toolbox that I didn't really need the Death Touch. But yeah, it's a powerful card, and when it does the thing, it does the thing.
Yeah. That's one of the cards that I was curious about. What else? You already told us about the you didn't see the need for Look Tough and Amulet of Echoes.
Yeah, poppers. That's another nice thing about CNC as well. That was kind of like where I like the card is because it's a pseudo popper. Like it doesn't work on some of her effects that like reduce the attack, but it does pop sometimes. So doing that kind of gives you that kind of allowance to not run the poppers and then just don't run into any verdants or don't run into any prison players and you don't need them. That's my strategy for it at least.
Yep.
But yeah. So that was another, like some poppers were another card I excluded. Another card I excluded was the Frailty Trap and the Overcrowded, which are like really powerful mirror tech in my opinion. Oh, and also Tome of Pandemonium. That was another card.
Yeah.
So those are a bunch of like mirror hate cards that I didn't really run. Basically in my testing, I was thinking about running, like when I was trying to fill out like the 80th card, I was thinking about, do I run an extra D-React or do I run an extra Frailty Trap? And I ended up running the extra Shelter from the Storm instead of the Frailty Trap for the mirror specifically. I just think that card is like really, really powerful in the mirror, being able to deny those flick effects to like, because the mark is really like what kills you a lot of the time against Arachne Marionette, and Syndra as well. Syndra is a matchup that is always going to be like a really close, like difficult matchup, especially with like a skilled Syndra player at the other side of the table. And this is one of those cards that kind of gives you a bit of equity there. And I just thought that the Frailty Trap would have a lot lower utility than the Shelter from the Storm going into this meta, and Overcrowd as well. I just thought that like I can have these cards that I only play against Arachne Marionette, or I can have just have a card that I can bring into more matchups. Like if I run into a Dio, if I run into a Syndra, I'm gonna be happy I have those extra D-Reacts. And then Tome of Pandemonium. So Tome of Pandemonium. So those are the first two, the defensive tech cards that I didn't run, but the tech cards that I didn't run. So this is another interesting an interesting spicy one that you may not have seen frequently, but Infiltrate was a card that I was heavily
Yeah.
considering in my list, and I was running in my 80 for quite a while.
Yeah.
And that card I think is like exceptionally powerful, like with the Take Up the Mantle build, and especially against Arachne in the mirror. Like that card is just so good. And the problem with Tome Pandemonium, in my opinion, is that there's so many fails in both decks, and missing with that card can be really devastating. So like you don't really want to see a D-React on top for either deck. And you're paying a resource for it, so it can get kind of clunky. So I just thought that card was a bit too inconsistent for what it was doing. And Infiltrate as well. Like if I was going to run like another, like if I wanted to run more Mario hate, Infiltrate's probably the next card I would be putting in the deck. I wasn't able to explore it fully in other matchups, which is why I ended up cutting it in the end. But I think that card can be really powerful. Like Infiltrate, like against Mario, like if you hit like a D-React on top, like that's just like the most insane thing ever. So
Yeah.
I think Infiltrate's really strong, and like probably like in some matchups, like the singular most must block effect in the game. I was playing. There was a time I played a little bit of Syndra, and someone was telling me, he's like, yeah, like in the Syndra mirror, like it's gotten to the point where like where my testing teammates, like we'll let the Art of the Dragon scales hit, but if take the tempo hits, we will never ever let that happen, because like some decks that can play a 6-card hand, you really are really crushing, and Mario's one of them, and Infiltrate is a card that enables that. So didn't run those cards this weekend, but Infiltrate's a card I can definitely see myself running in certain metas.
Yeah. It was like the first things I tweaked when I tried this deck out was I actually swapped one of the blue Mark of the Black Widow for an Overcrowded, because I felt like it was a pretty cheap inclusion for a really good card, like a tech card in the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, I have played with the card. I know that it's not. It happened that it's a 2-block. That could be like anything else, anything that you could just discard to spider form. I mean, it can be clunky, but I think it is a very good effect to have in the mirror. But I many times when I play with it, I see the cases against it.
Yeah.
It's a tough one. And I wrote down like the possible inclusions, like Infiltrate, you said. I also considered AOD, the red one.
Yeah, that's another card that's like I think those are probably the two best stealth cards I'm not running. And also Red Infect, which I think I'll also probably mention as well. But with regards to Art of Desire Body. So Art of Desire Body, I think that right now there just aren't really enough red decks where it's really good against. I think the matchups where it's best against are against like in the mirror and against Syndra. And Syndra I didn't expect to be super popular. I thought most Draconic players would be playing Fi. And even and then Arachne Marionette, like I think that if I'm running more Arachne Marionette hate, more mirror hate, I'd rather be reaching for Infiltrate in that matchup. I think it just has like a bit less of a fail case in the matchup. And they do similar things. But I think that card is powerful. I just don't think this is the meta for it. Like if you look at the other decks that you like, the other aggro decks that you'd want to be playing more stealth cards into, like Dash IO, she's running a ton of rainbow cards. Acilio's running a ton of rainbow cards. Even Fi is running a lot of like non-red cards. And I just feel like there's just a lot of decks where like the hit rate is just a little bit better than a coin flip. And we were talking about Meat Madness earlier and how people say they don't like when Meat Madness misses. Well, like Meat Madness is going to hit 2/3 of the time in a lot of situations.
Yeah.
And AOD Body is just giving you a worse, more chance of doing nothing a lot of the time. Yeah. So that's my thought on that card at least. Yeah. And then what else we said? Red Infect as well. Yeah. So Red Infect. So that was a card that I think that my deck building kind of leveled up for this, prepping for this event, because that was a card that I was running 3 of not too long ago. And then basically like I slowly started switching it out. I brought it down to a 2. Like I brought in the 2 Mark the Praise, and I brought in the and then I brought the Infects down to 2, and then down to 1, and then down to 0. And basically what I found was that Infect is a card that you keep in the main board, and it's the first card I'm siding out in every matchup when I need space.
Yeah.
So when I was in that phase of deck building where like I was kind of like getting close to an 80 that I liked, and I was kind of doing my sideboard plans and writing them out, I noticed I was taking out Infect almost every single time. And I realized that was just like, since I'm taking this out in 90% of matchups, it's just not a card I need to be running. And with a deck, like one of the big weaknesses is that you like the balance of how many stealth cards you're running in the deck is really important. I think I'm running about 20, give or take, in most matchups. Probably about 23 if I'm bringing in the Meat Madnesses. because if you're running too many stealth attacks, like you just find yourself in situations where your hand just doesn't convert. Like if you draw 3 stealth attacks, like that's just a tough hand to make do something. And yeah, so in those situations, like you're kind of like reliant on blocking to get the full value out of your hand. But in some matchups, like against the mirror, for example, if you draw 3 stealth attacks, like that's a deck that's really hard to block. And like if they throw like a big like graphene at you, like that's not, you don't want to be blocking there. You want to be finding ways to convert your hand a bit better.
Yes.
So in fact, I just found like I was running too many stealth cards, so that was a card I kind of trimmed down to reduce the amount of stealth density I had. And like this amount that I was running felt much more lean, while still reducing the amount of bricks that I had from drawing my Take Up the Mantles. I think that like I like to lean a little bit lighter on the stealth attacks because Take Up the Mantle is a yellow. Like if you consider the 2 fail situations where it's drawing too many stealth attacks and breaking your Take Up the Mantle, at the end of the day, your Take Up the Mantle, you can just pitch it for a dagger and call it a day. It's a resource card. So that's kind of where I went towards that. And I ran the Mark the Praise instead. I just found the Infect is like, or the Mark is like such a powerful effect and so important in so many matchups. There were a lot of games where like I was having to use my Mask of Deceit without choosing the form and just kind of rolling the die. But Mark the Praise like kind of a way to like guarantee which form you get. So I found that card to be more powerful than Infect in the current list at least.
Yeah, you bring up something really important there, because at first when you look at Red Infect, it's like the ceiling is a 0 for 6 go again, and that's pretty damn insane of a card. But the next thing you have to consider, as you said, is when you start writing your matchup notes down, you realize what spots this card is competing for. And in most matchups, or in every matchup, it turned out there were cards that you rather have than Infect. And I think that seems like a logical conclusion to say that maybe not. It's not the best card for me, because I feel like I want Infect, but I can't say I want it in these specific matchups. I mean, in a race, it can be a good card. It has to be respected in some way, but there are so many scenarios where I'd rather have something else. And like, yeah, and I think it's an important lesson to be learned in deck building there.
Yeah, like one of the matchups where it would look good would be Syndra, for example. Like if I had 82 cards, I could run 2 Infects and I wouldn't be running Hyperinflation that matchup. But I just kind of have these cards that I feel like are more versatile in more matchups than Infect is. So.
Would you consider running more buffs? You didn't run any Razor's Edge, for example, or Shred, for that matter.
Yeah, those are both cards that I was running as well. But again, like my deck is trying to kind of a switchboard. I'm trying to do 2 different things. So like the amount of cards that I have that are kind of good, I don't really have much space for those. Like every card I'm running needs to be like an absolute banger, and it needs to just be the perfect card in the matchup. And like Shred was a card that I was running for a while because I like the versatility, being good in both the dagger matchups and the stealth matchups. But I think at the end of the day, it was just like one of those cards that I noticed I was taking out. Like once you're trying to fill out your 60 of, like if you scroll up, like those 40 card core that I've got as my main board, like I'm running those in pretty much every matchup. And I was finding that like I had too many cards I wanted to run in every matchup. And then Shred, Infect, those are the cards that were coming out to make space for the other ones. Yeah. And Razor's Edge is a different card. So that's a card that I've also considered as well. That was a card that like I thought would be a big reason to run the stealth attacks, but you don't really need it. You kind of like, if you look at the deck, like you have Take Up the Mantle, you have Torrential Toxin, you have Stains the Redback, and you have Orb of Spinneret as your ways to like make your stealth attacks come in for more than is on their text. Yeah. And I found that like when I was testing initially, like Razor's Edge was by far the lowest play rate card in my deck. I think I was playing it like less than 40% of the time, less than 30% of the time on some lists as well. So it was just a card that like, yeah, when it's good, it wins you the game, but so does Take Up the Mantle. And yeah, like I just found I was cutting all the time, and then like because and being a yellow is like much better than being a red. Like the deck can actually take advantage of the yellow as a resource card like pretty effectively. So that's why I didn't run that card.
Yeah, and also like consistency is very important as well, because many decks can just look incredibly good if they draw the right cards, but we don't have the luxury of like blowing the opponent up with an Auxilia combo or Kano combo when he was in the constructed. We have to make good turn cycles again and again. And like, why, if we commit a lot to disrupting the opponent's hand, draw our new 4 cards, and it's a brick, we can lose the game right on the spot. So it's so important to have a couple of outs for each card that you include, because it can be very costly if we don't.
Yeah, I agree. Like, and you were talking about that. Like, we can't really blow people up. That was a problem I was having before. Like, a card that I like was running in RTN and PQ season was Yellow Mark of the Black Widow. And I was just kind of finding myself like in these situations where I just had too much disruption, and it's like I'd be playing against a Fi, I'd be playing against a KO, and it's like, yeah, like I'm disrupting them every turn, and then I would lose because I don't have enough value. So you really need to strike that balance between like how much disruption you're running and how much value you're running, which is why like a lot of the Dagger stuff started coming back in as I played more and more with the deck. Because 0 for 4 is good, and 0 for 3 sometimes is not where you want to be. And also like taking up a mark is also the marks are very premium as well. So
yeah, there's a limited amount.
Yeah.
Well, maybe realistically there is. But is there anything else you would like to add about the deck in general? I feel like we've been talking thoroughly about it for like 75 minutes.
Yeah.
I would love to hear a bit about your tournament run.
Yeah. I guess I don't have too much more to say about the deck. I think I've kind of gotten all of my points out. I think this is a really powerful archetype, and I think that like being able to include Take Up the Mantle is just a powerful card. I think it's a card that more people should be considering. I think people have kind of written it off ever since the Bonds ban.
Yeah.
But I think just being able to kind of have extra copies of Mark of the Black Widow and Kiss of Death in your deck is a really powerful effect. In a lot of matchups, and like you like playing with the cards kind of shows you like how like the power of what it can do, but it's not the best card in every matchup. It just takes some time to figure out where you want to run it, where you don't. Yeah, and then I guess like for my tournament run, I had some pretty interesting matchups. I think that the big takeaway I got from this tournament was that there's some metas that you just can't prepare for, and especially this one. I think this is the first like big CC event since Pen came out. So like I remember on day one, I played 2 matchups out of 7 that I had a sideboard plan for. I tried to plan for every single deck that I thought I might see, but yeah. So I guess I can kind of do a little bit of a mini tournament report. So my first game I faced a Slippy. So that was the first. So that's one thing about the deck. So we were talking about like the upsides and downsides of this versus the Stealth and the Dagger build, but Slippy is a matchup that I think is hard for the Dagger build, and I think that is just absolutely impossible to play if on this kind of configuration. Like it just turns the whole deck on, and the Take Up the Mantles are just so brutal. Yeah. So like that matchup was not nothing much to write about. Like there were 2 Slippies in the entire room, and I paired with one of them on round 1. So
it's a good start.
Got some gem luck there. Yeah. And then game 2, I faced a Dorinthia. That was actually a really interesting game. So the Dorinthia is another reason why I think that this was kind of the meta call that I went for, is because of Blunton. Blunton is just such an annoying card when you're playing the Dagger build. Like it can really, really mess you up. And I didn't think that the Warriors would be super powerful and super popular, but I know that there's a lot of Warrior players in my local meta, and I know that there's always going to be at least some of them at the event, and I expected to face at least one. And I faced Dorinthia. That game was really interesting. It was a really, really close game. She was first kind of going like for this big sword, and then her sword started getting really big, and I was able to get off a really disruptive turn with a Take Up the Mantle. That kind of was able to just kind of reduce her hand to basically nothing, and then that was able to kind of give me that space I need where she was able to throw her first sword for like 8 or something, and I was able to just kind of full block it. She had no cards behind, so I was able to block it, reset the counters, and then she kind of pivoted into a fatigue plan. And I almost got fatigued. I killed her on my last turn of the game, but that was a bit lucky. So on the second turn, I ended up pitching an Orb Weaver Spinneret to pay for my Graphene Chelicera swing on one of my turns. So the last 2 cards of my deck in the first cycle was a Kiss of Death and the Tarantula Toxin, and then we started the second cycle, and I drew my my Persuasive Prognosis and Orb Weaver Spinneret. So I actually almost lost that game because basically like after I reset her counters on her sword. She really juiced me with the third Blunton. So the first 2 Bluntons I was able to kind of sidestep since my hands were like all attack actions. I was able to kind of just throw a bunch of attack actions at her, and then she had to either pitch them or just block for 2 with the Blunton, getting no value. But the last one really juiced me, and that was the one she juiced me on was the one where and because she had the Blunton, I was forced to use my second flick and flick the second clave. And then I ended up finding myself in a position where I had no daggers like the following turn. I think I had to flick to get the Savor Bloodshed draw to flick my Graphene away, and to try and finish her off. And oh no, she had like one life, and I tried to flick her with the Graphene, and she was able to block it with the Take It on the Chin. So I was in like a really awkward spot where I had like a Stains with the red back like stuck in my arsenal, and it got down to my last turn where I was like, just do the last cards in my deck was Kiss of Death, Torrential Toxin, and then I looked at the rest of my deck and it was like 4 blues and then a Shelter from the Storm. So got a bit built out there by my accidental pitch stack, but yeah, that was a close game. I think that was the Dory that went 11-1 in the Swiss that made the top 8. So I was their only loss the entire time. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, round three. I had my first loss. That was when I paired into a Vincent. So that's a new matchup that I think people are going to need to start preparing for. That was a matchup that I wasn't prepared for personally. That bench build had a really good showing. I think June had a really great performance. Shout out to her. I think that deck is going to be something that we're going to be seeing a lot more of now. I think it's really well positioned because it's a really hard matchup for Arachne Marionette, and I think it's really powerful into a lot of other matchups that are popular as well. I think that I sideboarded incorrectly and kind of had the wrong game plan. I tried to race the Vincent, but I don't think that that's what Arachne Marionette wants to do. And because I was kind of the game was going about as well as it could have, for me being on that plan where I was able to get her down to 20 life on turn 3, but she was able to set up a bunch of Malefic incantations and just kind of pivot, and then it was just too much arcane damage for me to keep up, and then she was able to survive with a little bit of life and just finish me off with damage that I can't really prevent. So that matchup is something that I think in the future I'm considering changing how I'm approaching it. I'm considering playing more blues and build I ran daggers into her, just kind of try and race. But I think the better approach would be playing the stealth package, playing this kind of disruptive slow game, and playing patiently and just defending through. Because playing I've been playing a bit of Vincent to kind of understand how our deck works a bit better, and you just kind of need to survive until the Malefics are off the field.
Yeah, I thought that as well. That's another unfortunate game for Jacob Clemens on stream when he faced June. And it looked really rough with the Dagger plan because you will have to block. And you can either get screwed by not having blues in hand to prevent the rune chance, or you can get screwed by having inefficient blocks. You don't want to use the four front buffs to block for 2.
Mm-hmm.
So I, without knowing, I would guess it's an easier game to play with a higher floor if you bring the stealth package. But maybe we're not fast enough with that, or not disruptive enough. I don't know. Because I can also see the case for attacking and hitting with Margot Black Widow isn't that bad for Vincent. Often they can just banish a Runegate card and go on with their life.
Yeah, so that's the thing. But the thing is as well with Vincent, I played that matchup a lot more previously. With the new cards, it might be different. But I found that Vincent really wants to control how much blood that she's taking on. So if you're making her banish extra cards, you can sometimes put her in situations where she has too many blood deck cards that she can't convert, and then she just starts to take a bunch of damage from that. That's why I think that playing defensively can be pretty good, because you can kind of induce these fail states. And especially if she's blocking earlier on in the turn, having the Mark of the Black Widow later in the turn can really mess up her plans if she's has to banish a Malefic incantation, for example. So yeah, more testing needs to be done in that matchup, but that was my only loss on day 1. Following that matchup, I can't remember which order I faced him in, but I faced it for Dance. For Dance, yeah. So I faced it for Dance. I think I don't have much to say about the Dance matchups. I don't really remember how they went, really. I practiced that. That was the matchup I think I played the most, going into the event. Was practicing with my teammates and my friends. And I think that that one's just a matchup that with experience becomes extremely Mario favored. Once you kind of understand how her deck wants to block and how her deck operates, you're able to kind of abuse it with your turn cycles. And hyperinflation again once again was an all-star in that matchup. In that game, I think she had to pitch a card to pay for 2 D-reacts on that turn, where I played hyperinflation. And when something like that happens, it's just so much value. It's just so hard for the Verdansk to come back from a situation like that. And run Codex of Inertia. Codex of Inertia is really good in those matchups as well. So yeah, I don't really remember how that game went, but I did win that one. Both my Verdansk matchups were pretty clean, easy wins. But yeah, and then going into the Acilio, this Acilio had an interesting approach. He was just kind of trying to aggro me down the whole time. He told me he was running 0 D-reacts, and I had a bit of a chat with him after, and he was talking about how so basically like that was like kind of what I was talking about, where my approach to that match was to play like very patiently and to kind of like try and preserve disruption. So if I have the ability to disrupt twice in one turn, like I'll only throw one disruption and save the other one for a later turn. And I was just kind of able to just kind of keep them off, being able to do like a really big combo. Um, yeah, I think in that game, like I threw like a really I threw like a really nasty like leave no witnesses, and then he had to block with his chess piece, and I think that was kind of like the kind of end of that game. Once he like kind of lost the ability to like use his lightning greaves, it was just me kind of just like sitting on him at that point until he died. So yeah, so I find the Asylio matchup is a lot better with this version of the deck, like because you just have like so much disruption with your take up the mantles, and they don't really have the tools to combat how much disruption you can really throw at them. And you're also able to kind of get around the wobbles. That opponent was only playing 2 wobbles, but they just did nothing the whole game. Um, yeah, that opponent had an interesting list. He said that his plan was just to kind of try and race me and just like he has to combo and try and kill me before I start doing stuff. So that was interesting.
Yeah,
Oh,
I would say that the while the wobble ceiling is incredibly high, there will be a couple of times where even though you get wobbled, there's still -1 card from them as well, and they need their cards to put together big turns.
yeah,
So
like
it's it,
so that's the thing with wobble is like at the end of the day, wobble is mostly a D react
mhm,
unless it juices you. So like
yes.
if it just hits like one of your dagger pumps, like yeah, it sucks, but it's just a D react at the end of the day. It was just a 0 for 4. It's only really bad when like it's able to like disrupt your entire game plan by like hitting your Orb Weaver or like hitting your Saber Bloodshed or hitting your Codex. And that's something with this deck is that you can find yourself is what kind of happens. You have to kind of watch out for if you're kind of playing this more attack action heavy plan into Asilio. Is since you don't give them as many good targets for your non-attack actions, you're more likely to run in a situation where they're just kind of sitting on a wobble all game, and then you play the Codex, and then they finally get to play it. So that's kind of happened in my second game, but we'll get to that one after. But yeah, that was just kind of like just applying consistent pressure with my stealth attacks, and was able to just kind of win that game by timing my disruption well and keeping them off the combo. Next game I faced a Marlin. That game I had a really interesting turn one.
It was the
Um,
Reaper's Call into Inertia.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah. So yeah. So I played Reaper's Call, and like my Marlin was just gonna go past. I played my Reaper's Call, and I discard a Shelter from the Storm, so I have 2 cards left in my hand. So my Marlin's like, oh, I gotta go for this one. And then they play the Ravenous Rabble and see a 3 of a kind on top. And then after the Ravenous Rabble, or another Murderous Rabble, whatever the pirate one is, I blocked it with my Inertia Trap, gave her an Inertia token, and then she pops her gold from her Crown of Dominion, and pops her gold from Crown of Dominion, draws a harpoon, and I wasn't able to pump it somehow, like off of the 3 of a kind, and just fires a harpoon for 5. I block it with my boots and the extra floating prevention I had from the Shelter from the Storm. And yeah, that was pretty much all that. Oh, and also they activated the hook. I don't know why. I think my opponent made a bit of a misplay there, activating the dry hook in that situation. Maybe they assumed I couldn't block with only 1 card left in my hand, but yeah, I was able to block it. Got the hook turn 0, got them off the arsenal with the inertia, and then yeah, just kind of smoothly just kind of rode that to victory. But that match was interesting. I would like to indicate that that's a good matchup for the dagger plan in this deck. I'm glad I was able to kind of have that kind of option of going like full daggers because so much of our disruption was based on like getting my attack actions. So being able to kind of side out some of my stealth attacks and being more heavier on the non-attack actions was really powerful in that matchup to avoid the disruption. Um, After the Marlin, what did I face with the Marlin?
Valda.
Valda, yeah. So that was my last match on day one. That was like an extremely close game, and that was the game that like kind of solidified hyperinflation as a card I'm going to be running in the foreseeable future. Every hyperinflation I played that game was just like absolutely insane. The first one I played, like my opponent like had to pitch for a sink below. The second one I played, I was able to like basically curve hyperinflation into a command and conquer, like just pitching a blue, and then my opponent had to block with a fiddlers and their crown of providence sinking their arsenal. So I can only assume that I probably like hit the D react in the arsenal from there, and then I won the game off the last hyperinflation. Yeah, mentioned earlier, but threw a bunch of daggers at her, and then she had 1 card in hand, 1 card in arsenal. Codex for hyperinflation made it unable to pay for the D-react in the arsenal, had to pitch the boulder drop that would have killed me with Dominate. So that was a really exciting game, really close game, and I think that deck is really powerful. I think that's something to kind of watch out for going forward. I think that deck has some legs and can be really strong into this meta. Now that was the end of day one, 6-1. So feeling good about day one. And then going into day two, I faced Jordan Jalbert Ross on KO as my first opponent. He's a reigning Canadian national champion, so this guy's pretty good. And yeah, we had a really, really close game. It was really good. My Meat Madnesses were like extremely powerful in this matchup. I think I hit hand 3 times in the matchup with my Meat Madnesses. So, and he even discarded a Blood Rush Bellow to Wild Ride. So this matchup was like kind of going exactly how I wanted it to go, and like, but I did end up making a mistake that cost me the game. It was like one of the more subtle ones. I was in my Orbeaver form and I was trying to play around his Flesh Bag. So I discarded a card and pumped my Reaper's Call. I had a Take Up the Mantle in my arsenal, and he had already seen me play Take Up the Mantle earlier in the game, and I had my boots up. And I pumped my Reaper's Call, so I attacked him for 4 with a Reaper's Call with the intention of Take Up the Mantling into Disruption. And because I pumped it, that kind of allowed him to, that kind of set the alarm bells off in his head. So he was able to kind of like identify that something bad was going to happen. So he was able it kind of enabled him to do a big overblock. Yeah. And his big overblock was what gave him enough life to end up winning the game. And what I think I should have done is I should have just sent the Reaper's Call, like, and then threatened the Stalker Steps, because that's one thing in that matchup is I love the Stalker Steps in that matchup, because the game kind of comes down to him blocking out one of your disruptive effects with his fridge, and then you can kind of go under it with the Stalker Steps. And in that situation, if I just played the Reaper's Call for 1, he's not able to overblock it, because then I'm threatening the attack of the Stalker Steps, and then he just gets destroyed. But because the line I took, I was trying to preserve my Stalker Steps and kind of play around the Flesh Bag a little bit, and I got punished for it. Ended up being 1-1, and he ends up finishing me off with a 1-card Reckless Stampede hand. So it was the final life was like 1-2, and I was trying to like threaten the flick. But yeah, he ends up getting me with the Reckless Stampede. So that was my first loss of the day. He played that perfectly. Better player won that game. It happens. And then going into my next,
it's like I'm so glad to get rid of KO anytime soon, because I've been playing into him for a while with Marionette. I've heard a lot of Assassin players say that, oh, this is a good matchup. Though I don't see it. I can't see it. It's like, even though, as you said now, a lot of things went your way, like discarding Blood Rush on Wild Ride, hitting hand 3 times with that madness, and still, it's a very close game. That should be a slam dunk if this would have been a good matchup for us, but I just can't see it. It's...
Yeah. I think the matchup is definitely good. I think the matchup definitely is better, like, for this configuration of Mario, like being able to go into the stealth plan. But the problem with the matchup is that, like, the KO has a lot of agency in the matchup to kind of control the pace of the game with their blocks. I think that the biggest card in the matchup is the Vigorous Mashups. If your opponent's playing the yellow Vigorous Mashups, those cards are so good because it allows them to kind of block and like still play out their hand. So I think that, like, I would still say that matchup is favored. But I think that, like, especially with this version, because you have so much disruption that you're able to kind of slow them down and keep them off those big Blood Rush Bellow turns. But the matchup can definitely go wrong, and the matchup can definitely be challenging. I don't think it's as favored as it used to be in the past. Like, with all the new cards, like the KO is just so consistent, and the small hands can be so powerful. I don't know if I'm happy to see him go. I like KO. I think that's a fun deck, but definitely not one that I love running into. It can really be a toss up in how that goes. I'd say it's pretty even. It feels, especially against a skilled player.
Yeah, that's good to hear. I've given up. I'm not learning this now. I guess it's losing matchup for me at least, but it's great to hear that it's not for everyone else.
I think the thing with that matchup is that your losses stand out to you more. You get some confirmation bias, because when you lose the KO, like, it feels really bad. Like, you got like bonked for 30 by a Blood Rush Bellow, and it feels terrible. And then the games you win, you don't really remember, because the KO just kind of dies and does nothing. So it's possible that, like, you're like, it feels a bit worse because when you lose, it feels really bad. But I think that matchup, like, it should be pretty okay. Maybe you can play some more stealth stuff and get some more disruption.
Yeah, maybe.
Should make it feel a bit better. More 3 blocks. Those are good too.
Yeah, I think, like, the worst part probably has been, like, even though everything pretty much goes wrong for KO, and I still barely manage to squeeze out the win or like lose, even though everything goes wrong for them. That's the most discouraging part.
Yeah. It's tough. It's a tough matchup. It's a tough matchup, and KO's got a lot of tools, and he has like 100 armor on his fridge, so it's a lot of health you gotta get through.
Yeah, the
Scowling Fleshbag is a good card.
Fleshbag is so awesome. It's a really good card as well. I like the design, but it's really hard to play against.
Yeah. There's an art to Fleshbag from the brute players. I like that card.
Yeah. Yes.
But so lost the KO there. Then next round I face a Syndra. And I think Syndra is like one of those matchups where like this deck like really shines, and especially like the self configuration. I think I was like I lost a die roll in that game, so I was going first, so I was already on the back foot starting that game off. And I felt like I was losing. Like I was down like 15 life or so at one point. But because I was playing this kind of stealth form, and I was able to find I had a really good Mark of the Black Widow turn where I was able to use my mask to turn into the Black Widow agent. So I was able to kind of get like that double disruption on one of my turns. She tried to like block it for 6, and then I was able to go over it with a second attack reaction. Um, and then basically like it was 4 turns in a row where I was just attacking her hand with disruption because I just either had a Mark of the Black Widow or take up the mantle into a Mark of the Black Widow. And I think that's just kind of what you need, like that, like it's tools like that that allow you to just kind of like maintain tempo in this matchup. And I found that like that matchup is another matchup that like in theory should be easier for the assassin player, but like with the more dagger centric builds, like you just don't have the disruption density a lot of the time, and your numbers just aren't good enough sometimes. So if you start falling behind, you don't really have any good comeback mechanisms. But with this deck, you have to take up the mantle,
Yeah.
and that's kind of those ways we can kind of steal those games back where you're starting to fall behind against these aggro decks.
Yeah, that's an important point. If you trip, for example, having to pitch for the graphene, you have full tempo or life lead, having to pitch a red card to pitch a swing graphene for whatever number, the rate will not be there. The rate's a lot worse than they would be for Syndra if they can just take the damage and swing back with whatever hand they have and threaten
Yeah.
like double threaten mask, something like that.
Yeah.
They will catch up to you.
Yeah, and with Syndra especially, it's like sometimes you just can't have those good like graphene turns. Like sometimes like you just can't afford to give up the mass momentum, especially like once you're starting to fall behind. So you're kind of forced to block in these situations. And having those extra 3 blocks as well is really nice. And like all those extra, like I'm running a ton of D reacts, I'm running a ton of blocks. So I'm kind of able to kind of posture up until I can have those big disruptive turns and chain a bunch of disruption in a row and take the win. So yeah, that was a super close game. Yeah, and I think I don't think there's any way I would have won that if I wasn't going to take up the mantles. Going into the next game, I faced another Acilio.
Yes.
This Acilio was a win. This one was like a much harder game because this Acilio was playing like much more defensively with like cloud covers and sink belows, and they were basically just kind of like something that like people when you play the matchup, you kind of find that like Acilio is like really good at like staying alive. He's like really like annoyingly hard to kill. And this is the matchup where basically like I played a CNC at the beginning of the game, got a bunch of blocks and arsenaled my Codex, and then my tunic ticked up. I had the tunic at 3. I didn't use a tunic the entire game because I was just kind of able to convert all my hands. Like all the stealth stuff was just doing the stealth stuff without needing any resources. I don't even think I had graphene for most of the game. And I was just kind of sitting on the Codex of Frailty in my arsenal, just waiting until the time where you're ready to pounce. Like something that I really like to do in the matchup is like the Gone in a Flash is like such a key card for their combo turn. When you know it's in the arsenal, like that's kind of what your signal that you need to start attacking the arsenal no matter what. So like my opponent had an arsenal on a lot of turns, but if they have like a Sigil of Brilliance or something in the arsenal and you throw a CNC at it, like it's really like crushing to kind of lose that disruption. So that was kind of the thought process in that one. It's just about being patient. I knew that I was winning the game because every turn that Acilio blocks you is a turn that they're not going to be comboing you on the next turn. So I was kind of able to just like continue to apply this pressure and just chip a little bit of damage and just chip the life down slowly over time. And then the Acilio just ended up running out of time. On the turn where like I had the space and the resources to try and throw the CNC into or the Codex into CNC, like that was the Acilio had the wobble ready. But that was in their arsenal, so I feel like we were just both kind of like having like a bit of a Mexican standoff where it's like
Yeah.
they have the wobble, I've got the Codex, and we're just kind of doing that. But my 4 card hands are better than his 4 card hands,
Yeah.
so ended up just kind of slowly like winning that game over like the course of attrition. Just good flesh and blood.
Wouldn't
Um,
wouldn't they be afraid of getting fatigued if they keep on blocking? I don't know the numbers for Cilio, but I would imagine there are like a finite number of the damage points in their deck. Um,
um, I don't know. Like it's hard to say. Like I think that the thing is like they weren't just full blocking me like the whole game. Like they were just blocking the disruption. But the thing is the disruption is coming every turn.
yeah,
Like you
that's
kind of
it.
give them you kind of give them these situations where they have no choice but to block you. It's like if I'm throwing a mark of the Black Widow at you, you have to they have to block it. They have no choice. They can't just like take it a lot of the time, especially once their life total starts getting low. And yeah, and I think that like Acilio was kind of fishing for that turn where I miss on the disruption and is able to kind of do it like throw a combo and kind of get some tempo back. But I was able to hold on to tempo the whole time, and that's just kind of the key of like spacing out like when you're doing your disruption, not using it all at the same time, just to ensure that you can kind of keep the Acilio on the back foot like that.
Yeah, Alexander Bohr is no slouch. He's a really good player. So
Yeah.
I'm certain he knows more about the matchup than I do, but I'm a bit surprised about that game plan. I haven't faced it yet, but it's interesting to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I think that's just kind of how Cilio wins a lot of time, is just kind of like blocking out and then finding a way to like finding space to set the combo using like the armor is really important in that matchup, where they have to kind of use their armor in a way to like make space to throw their combo at you. So that's a really interesting matchup. I actually really enjoy playing the matchup. It's hard and it's scary, but it's fun to play a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I faced Acilio again. This one I faced Michael Hamilton, and he just absolutely like rolled me. Just that just happens. Acilio did the Acilio thing. Like turn one, or I lose a die roll. I'm going first. I really like going second in the matchup, but didn't win the die roll that time. I'm going first, and then he has three blocks in his hand. I feel like a pain in the backside, and then throw dagger. He blocks it all, and then I try and flick the dagger at the end, and his last card's a cloud cover, and I was like, oh, are you kidding me? And yeah, and then his next turn he like throws like a big like meteor strike at me, or whatever the big Acilio burn bear
Yeah.
is basically. He throws that at me, does like 7 damage, has like a CLV set up, and then next turn I throw I do a bunch of stuff, throw leave no witnesses. He plays a Sigil of Brilliance out of his arsenal, and then just like nukes me with like 100 blast of oblivions. So yeah, that happened, and that's kind of what knocked me out of top 8 contention. I was still like super alive at this point, but losing that game was kind of what put me on the back foot. I was behind Tao Tao and Jacob Gladman and Naib for who would get the 8th spot. So there was still a chance that I was alive to the very end. So there was still a chance where I'd make it into the top 8, but all 3 of those players would have to lose, and none of them did. So came 11th, we take those. But yeah, then my last matchup, I was facing a Verdansk player, and like this was just like the absolute like worst time ever for the Verdansk player. Turn one, I get the flick off, where they don't have the prevention effect, so they're marked. And then, or at turn 0, I get the flick off, so they're marked going into their turn 1. They throw like an E strike at me. I block it with my hat, turn into Orb Weaver, and then my second turn of the game is use my Orb Weaver, savor bloodshed, and then throw the graphene for like what is that, 13? Throw the graphene for 11, go again, and then I had a T-Tox and a scar tissue as well, like on that hand. So then I hit him, draw 2, like throw leave no witnesses, and then yeah, that's just the game. Like the Verdance wasn't really able to play. Like I had that one big turn at the beginning of the game, and I was able to kind of ride that to victory.
Yeah, I must say, you said before that you feel like Verdance is, if not the best, one of the better matchups for you. Did I get that correctly?
I don't know if I'd go so far as to say it's like the best matchup. I think the best matchup is Slippy. Like I feel like
Yeah.
I was just like if I was like if I can choose my matchup every time, I'm taking the Slippy.
Yeah.
But I think Verdance is definitely one of the better matchups. I think that's one of the appealing things about Mario to me, is that Mario kind of has this like flat matchup spread where it's like most of your matchups are like in that like 40 to 60 range, give or take. You're not really super polarized, where you have these like matchups that are like super favored and super unfavored. Like I played a bit of Florian before, and it's like Florian has like matchups where he's going to win 100% of the time, and matchups where he's going to lose almost 100% of the time. And Mario isn't really like that. So it's like Verdance is like one of the best matchups. I don't know, hard to say, but she definitely falls in the upper side of the spectrum in my opinion, in my experience.
Yeah, because Verdance is one of those that I've heard many players, both better and worse than me, that say that they really do like the Verdance matchup, and I think that one is usually tough as well. I remember it. I thought it was tough even with Bonds of Agony. I think it has been tough, both with Dagger builds and more stealth heavy builds.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
My tip for that matchup is just understanding like how the Verdance wants to play the game and understanding her game plan. She just wants to throw 2-card hands at you all game long, and you need to kind of like that's what she's going to be doing, and you need to kind of play around how you can beat that. And being able to predict the D reacts, cut from the same cloths are really important to kind of like see what's in her hand, so you don't walk into a mental block. And yeah, I don't know. I think it's just a matchup that takes like a lot of reps, and the more reps you get, and the more you kind of understand like what she's doing and how she can do her broken things and how you can stop them is something that just kind of takes some time.
It makes sense. So in the end, 9 and 3, 11th place at the calling. I mean, it's you should be really proud of yourself. It's
Thank you. Yeah, I
really well
am.
done. And
Yeah, I
I
worked
like, yeah, and also speaking to you for almost 2 hours, I can tell that you have put a lot of thought into both playing and deck constructing.
Yeah, I just love the deck.
Mm.
I love the deck and I love the game, and I worked really hard for this event. I spent a lot of time like grinding out as much as I could with as strong players as I could, putting a lot of thought, a lot of iteration in the deck. Like if you look at my Fabry, it's just copy, 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 and then
Mm.
like it's like I think probably 3 or 4 pages solid of just different Arachne Marionette decks that I just tried to put together to try and find what I thought was the best configuration for me and for this event.
Mm.
So yeah,
So
I
what's
am
the
proud
next?
of myself.
Yeah, you should be. What's the next spice come out of you?
The next spice, the next spice coming out of me probably concoct decoction blue. I feel
Oh
like
god!
that
Oh, I
card,
tried it.
concoct disorder blue. That
It's
card's a
so
crazy
fun.
blue,
Oh, it's so
crazy blue.
frustrating. It's so
Yeah,
frustrating. I tried it. It's every time I saw it, I hated it. It's like I can't use this. It's like it ticks every box that I don't want. Even though like the ceiling is awesome, but it's I,
yeah. What's
I want to play the card, but it's giving me a hard time. But I would love for you to make it work.
Yeah, I hope I can figure it out too. I like that card a lot. Another build I really like of Mario that I keep trying to make work that I didn't think was right for this event is Blood Splattered Vest. I
Yeah,
think Blood Splattered Vest is like a really powerful equipment, and doing something like a flicking to get a Blood Splattered Vest resource to pay for pick up the point. Those are just really fun like play lines. So yeah, sounds like maybe I should be playing some more Slippy. These are the cards I want to play, but yeah, for now
yeah,
Mario.
that, and you can also use like the 6 to 9 cut for the same cloth sensor Mario.
Oh yeah, the
That
the
is also
sensor Mario with all the yeah. I've seen some of that floating around. Yeah, that's an interesting card. I don't know if I have the skill ceiling required to play the sensors, but we'll see.
yeah, that's why you have 9 cats for the same cloth. You don't need a skill. You know what they have.
There
But
you go.
as long as you don't do as I did, yes, see their hand and then forgetting what they had.
Oh
Um,
yeah,
so
it's the Talishar Classic for me, and then scrolling up through the chat log to
yeah,
double
you get
check.
makes you lazy to have that thing to do. But
Yeah,
it's you open the door for embarrassing yourself by forgetting their hand. But it's a very good interaction. And like
yeah,
the pitch a blue for attacking with a clay for 5 into sensor. It's a really good 3 card hand.
yep. I agree. Yeah, and another card I want to play around with a little more too is Justinic.
Yeah,
I think that like I want to increase the amount of blues in the deck, especially if we're going into like a more Vinset heavy. If we can expect a lot of Vinset players, running some more blues would feel nice. And I think that like Justinic also synergizes really nicely with Take Up the Mantle. So I always find that card fun. It's hard to justify like post Bonds ban, but I always try a couple iterations with it in the 80.
yeah. What cards are there? Like Art of Desire could be used. Bonds of Attraction. I mean, there are extra damage to be found with Bonds of Attraction if you add the Rune Gates with Justinic.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I think Justin Nick, like even with his blue base, I think it's fine because I think that like at the end of the day, like the Justin Nick is it's just going to be a lot of surprise damage even on a
Yep.
blue, and yeah, and then if you use Justin Nick and then take up the mantle into something else, like that's just insane.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a really neat interaction. Plus the extra banish, um,
Yep.
which actually matters more than I thought it would do. As in a vacuum, banish an extra card can actually have a big effect in a couple of matchups.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but looking forward to it. And final words, is there anything you'd like to add? Any shout outs?
Yeah, some shout outs. First, I want to shout out my team, Team Oasis. These guys have been great. They've been motivating me and pushing me all the time and helping me get better at Flesh and Blood. Wouldn't be able to do it without them. Some other shout outs I want to make. Kashi, he's super active on the Assassin Discord. If you've been on either Purple or Assassin Discord, I'm sure you've seen his name. Like, he's an extremely strong player. I've done a lot of work with him, like just working on matchups and stuff. And it's just inspiring to like play with him. Like he just like takes Mario to like another level. Like this guy is just so good at the deck, and you don't really know until you like see him play. But he's extremely skilled and super helpful, and really like helps bring the community forward.
Yeah.
And last one is my friend Matt Shelley. I want to give him a shout out as well. Like he's kind of my main like theory crafter companion. So he's the guy who I kind of talked to on Discord, sending him the different iterations of my deck. Asked what he looks like. He's another assassin player, just a friend of mine. And yeah, he's really helping with the deck building. He helped identify like hyperinflation and a lot of the weak points in the deck a lot of the times. And he's really helped me elevate my deck building and my playing game. So yeah, those are the shout outs I wanted to make.
That's awesome. Thank you so much again for taking time. It was a pleasure talking to you. It's really interesting to hear your thoughts and reasoning about playing and constructing the deck.
Yeah, thank you. It was a pleasure talking with you as well. Yeah, I'm excited to feature on the channel.
Yeah. So take care.